Arliss, could you, parliamentarian, cover your draft rules of procedure, and then we'll ask Lisa for the qualifications and requirements of the executive secretary or director.
Do we have any extra copies by any chance?
All I have in front of me is one that Arliss gave me.
Have a copy. Okay. Basically, on these rules of procedure, they're quite simple. Lisa and I have checked them to see that they are in conformance with the Unification Act. I really think it might be well to, if you wish to take action tonight, to really go over it item by item so that you will know and feel, perhaps you feel they're too complex or that they're not detailed enough. How would you like to proceed on it? Do you think to read it, and if there's no objection to go on? Say move for approval and then amend as we go along, however you'd like to approach it.
Has everybody a copy?
We're going to give her a copy to our last member. 1, 2.
All right, I would make a motion that we approve the rules of procedure as submitted.
Is there a second?
Oh, no.
Then would you like to just go over item by item? Do you think it's necessary to read them out, or merely let you do that, and as you come to something that you'd like some explanation to discuss it?
I think that would be better. It'd take too long to sit through and read it tonight.
Okay.
Excuse me, Frank.
Yes.
Dick Fisher for the microphone. This isn't anything that's urgent tonight, and if we all have an opportunity to go over it at our leisure, I think that we can come back and save the commission's time at the next meeting and adopt it, because it doesn't seem to me that anything urgent you have to move in.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a somewhat different idea, because I noticed that the
Article 5 states that the rules may be amended by a majority vote of the membership of the commission. Thus, if we adopted them, we could, in the light of experience, we could adjust them by a majority vote. And I would therefore suggest to have rules that we should adopt them, and with the understanding that we can change them as our experience dictates.
If you do decide to move ahead, there are two areas I would like to point out to you on the last page. I think they need a little, perhaps, discussion. If you take a look at Article 2.5, which... Oh, we're having 2.5. It states that all meetings, it's on the back, all meetings of the Commission shall be open to the public at all times. This is directly from the Title 29 on the Unification Act. I happen to feel quite nervous about that. I think there are times, such as when you are employing a secretary or a legal person or an executive secretary, possibly discussing personnel matters or internal commission matters, that it might be well to be able to have an executive session under very careful consideration. However, the administrative code, which I've cited here, does allow for closed sessions in certain circumstances, and when you do get into this area of where you might injure someone, it's allowed. However, it is in direct conflict with the Title 29, and we're just bringing the problem to you. I'm not an attorney. I don't know if we can say be governed by the administrative code if the Unification Act itself speaks specifically and states that meetings will be open. I'd be interested in some comment from Joe on that.
Well, I'd like to look at them, but I imagine that if
I could.
there's specific mention in 29.
If you'd like to take a look there, I believe it's D or E. D.
D.
240.
administrative code provision?
No, I do not have it. I did have it quoted to me, and it does allow for the type of thing that I described, where you're talking about personnel matters or matters that might injure any individual if it were not discussed in private. And I believe certain contractual matters when you get into.
Well, we had that provision governed us at the federal, state, and the planning commission. So
The administrative code,
Yes.
we've used that too now in the capital site selection committee and have used it.
But I would think generally the specific would control the general, so the specific reference would control us. Reference.
That's my personal opinion.
Again, we could, by a vote of a majority, change that, right?
I don't believe we can.
Well, unless it's unlawful.
Now, unless it's unlawful through Article 29. If it is,
Well, how often is that situation going to arise?
Well, the ones that Carlos mentioned, I think that is.
That's only gonna-
Personnel.
Huh? It's
Right.
only once or twice that we're going to hit that, and I think as a commission we can agree that it's a private personnel matter at that time. It's not a commission meeting per se. It's an administrative personnel matter that we're looking at. I don't think anybody can quarrel with that.
Okay, that was for your information and whatever you feel is appropriate. The other thing I'd like to point out, and here we do not come with a recommendation, you may wish to consider possible action in the case of commissioners who consistently fail to attend meetings. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fisher might be able to speak to, I believe you did have some problems, did you not, with the first Charter Commission, one or two members, kind of during that interim time after the first charter had failed as far as their attendance. And I don't know whether you would want, say, perhaps to put something in that the chairman would be directed to ask for their resignation or talk to them or something like that. I merely pointed out we're not coming with a recommendation. There's nothing in the statutes that once a person is elected to remove them. Well, I think that
Reed, I would doubt very much that there'd be anything in the code even for removal of an elected official unless you went to
There's a
the public.
reference, Mr. Chairman, to vacancies being how you fill vacancies, but it doesn't really, there's no reference to explain what a vacancy
How do you create one?
Mr. Chairman, one problem that I understood happened on the last commission, I may not have all of my information correctly, that as long as there is a majority of the commission, they can replace vacancies. If you do not have a majority, it goes to the assembly. And I understand, again, in this interim time, it came close to that position where the Charter Commission wished to retain the right to appoint new members, but it was very close to going to the assembly.
Did you have substantial problem with it, Dick?
Yes, we had a problem with attendance, but there's nothing you can do about it. Either the person is a good grace to resign, or they don't. And there's simply nothing you can do about it in here.
Okay, well, that's fine. I
Well.
just wanted to point it out that there's. I think the other things were pretty standard. You may wish to look at Article 2, 3 regarding special meetings. We provided that they could be called by the chairman or by any 6 commission members. You may feel that is an excessive number in order to call a special meeting, and there again, that's an arbitrary figure.
Section 211,
Pardon?
under appearance requests, what the agenda looks like. What's no later than 5 p.m. the Friday preceding the meeting?
Sturgeluski, on the response in the order of business, page 2, item 11, the appearance request, there had been a little bit of discussion last week as to whether the public would be heard, and it seemed perhaps appropriate if someone is prepared ahead of time to give, say, a presentation, and we could set time limits for it, and made the effort once we have an office to contact and make an appearance request, that perhaps we could give them the courtesy of hearing them at the first of the meeting and then having at the end a place for persons to be heard not on the agenda. And
Okay, my objection is that they have to know a week in advance. We meet on Thursday. You're saying they have to know by Friday, following
Right.
the meeting, that they want to talk next Thursday.
they would know by Friday that they wish to address us at the next Thursday meeting. Now, the Borough Assembly, the Planning Commission, and others follow this weekly thing. And as I say, it's an arbitrary thing and it doesn't bother me one way or another.
This probably
Personally,
would,
I think that's too much.
Why don't you make an amendment? Oh, excuse me.
Is the motion on the floor to,
there was a motion made, but I did not hear a second.
I thought it was...
Yes, I second
It was
Oh,
Mr.
you,
President.
all
Ronnie
right,
seconded
I'm
the
sorry,
main motion.
I did not hear the second. A
the
motion
motion on the
to
floor
adopt
is
the
to
rules
adopt
of
the rules of procedure.
Right,
procedure.
as presented.
Any further
May I ask a
discussion?
question
Yes.
through the chair to Ms. Andrews?
Yes.
Are you suggesting some other period of advance notice, say the preceding Monday, or are you suggesting dispensing with the advance notice?
No, I think there should be advance notice of an appearance. When will the agendas be prepared? How much in advance?
I would think that the agenda would be prepared sufficiently in advance to get it out to the members, and to put it in the mail. It's going to have to be prepared almost.
Mr. President, I think
3
that
days.
getting it in the mail is unrealistic.
Yeah.
I, for one, sometimes get my mail 8 to 12 days later.
And we'll just have to set the agenda prepared and be in the office by, I would say, the day before then.
I would think that, or perhaps the Borough Courier might be kind enough to distribute it. But I wouldn't guarantee it. I'd have to
Right.
check.
Well, my feeling is that
Angry.
that it should be as little notice required as possible in an effort to look like we're interested in hearing what people have to say.
Mr. Josephson.
To that, I do note that item H allows anyone to be heard who has not given required notice.
Chairman,
It just delays them to the end, Mr. Parsons.
for example, the council has a provision similar to this, but not quite as long. For their Tuesday meeting, I think you have to have by Thursday or Friday noon, something like that. And with our meetings on Thursday, perhaps Monday noon might be a better time. How do you feel about that, Jane? Or you want less even?
I'd say Tuesday or Wednesday.
Let's compromise and say Tuesday, if it's agreeable with everybody. Tuesday noon.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Fisher.
I don't. Jane, I understand what you're getting to, but I don't think it's a problem. I think the person preparing our agenda is going to really have to get it done Monday, and I don't know that. I think that what we ought to do is just scratch that completely and just appearance requests and leave it up to the chairman, because I would think we want to hear everyone we can, but at the same time there's just some practical limitations. I don't know why we should be setting any hard, fast rules where that's concerned. I'd just soon scratch it completely. I mean, have it in there.
Mr. Chairman,
Joseph.
I think that a Tuesday meeting provision is a fair compromise. If there is no provision, then the chair is in a position of picking and choosing, and subject to criticism no matter what you decide to do. do. That X is told to come at the end of the meeting and Y is told to come at the fourth item of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to amend by deletion and addition to delete 5 p.m. and substitute or add Tuesday noon.
Tuesday night.
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Those opposed? Is there any further discussion on the motion to adopt the rules of procedure?
Item 10, page 2, Mr. Chairman.
And page 2. The agenda for each regular meeting.
Does that
of the commission.
mean, obviously it doesn't mean that we can't amend the agenda, right? No, I just want that clearly understood.
Mr. Chairman, that in response to Mr. Fisher, item 10. Yes, the agenda can be at any time. You can change your.
Amended by majority vote or
Well,
in fact, should-
no, you can just, would take just a majority vote to change the agenda when it's actually before you. But that is the form that it should come, and then
Well-
you take specific action that night to set items off or to consider them later or expedite them or whatever.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
perhaps
Angry?
we could, on the agenda, say adoption of agenda as item number D or C.
D?
Well, it seems to me in Robert's Rules of Orders, you do go through the motion of adopting the agenda in meetings.
You can't.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sheffield?
Did you say I think it's item 10, but when will the agenda be prepared and if the LACE requests are due on Tuesday,
I would-
when you suspect it will be?
I would think it would be prepared Tuesday afternoon and be available probably by Wednesday morning at some given place or late Tuesday afternoon.
I think it'd be good if we at least had it by Wednesday evening, Wednesday afternoon.
well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we voted on that amendment already, but, giving us one evening to review what's going to come before the next meeting really worries me, and that's why I didn't like the 12 o'clock Tuesday. But going back to that, I want the opportunity for any commission member to bring up any item of business without it having to be on the agenda. That's what concerns
It
me.
would,
We have an amendment.
F, new business, or E, unfinished business, or
Well, possibly I, but I just want to be clear about
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I might suggest an amendment that, and before I make it, just to get some feeling, after new business, how about prior to reports to say add an item of other business? Here, in other words, when we're talking about new business, we're talking about specific new business that is on the agenda. Then perhaps we need some that would be just other, that would be an opportunity to bring up items.
appropriate.
Is there a feeling that that might be appropriate?
Mr. Joseph?
Item I, if it is worked in the same way that I think our local government does allow any commissioner
correct.
to raise a matter to the attention of the commission. But on the other hand, I really hope we discourage, at least by the sense of the body, if not by rule, the notion that any one of us can come in and offer motions on subjects or text for action where we have not had time to consider. I mean, I think we're going to get along a lot further, and the public will respond a lot better if there's a sense of order and preparedness. And while we want to have informality, I really don't like I'm afraid of the idea that I may have to pass judgment on something I never considered before because it is my liberty. My comments are only designed to express a personal feeling, and I hope that isn't done in excess.
It would seem to me, Joseph, that anything that was brought up at a meeting on which you did not wish to pass a judgment would probably be the sense of the body as a whole that they didn't wish to pass judgment. If you expressed that feeling to him. Now, maybe I'm wrong with that, but it would seem to me if Mr. Fisher brought something up tonight that we just didn't want to see, or you brought something up that we didn't want to work with.
It would never be I.
Mr. Chairman, in that case, it seems very often you might wish, or a motion might be made by some member to postpone that for consideration until the next meeting, and then it would appear as an item of unfinished business first on the agenda, which would allow for this time of reflection. There's always that opportunity.
Could I then inquire, Mr. Chairman, in connection with the rules, it seems to me that something that might have to be addressed is the way we actually develop the text, the charter. You have some protections in local government because you have several readings of the proposed text. That isn't here unless it's in the...
No, we did not.
Okay.
We did not address that.
I don't know it. I think it ought to be raised and discussed. Whether the rules should provide some sequence of events where we come to a result, because under these rules, we could at any time, if the mood struck, adopt a complete charter or a complete article or half a charter, and I just wonder whether we shouldn't have some staged procedure where, for example, a text is not final until it's adopted twice or something of that sort, but I would rely on the experience of Mr. Fisher and yourself to serve this.
From my standpoint, ours was very simple compared to this charter, and this is going to be much more complex. We found no problem at any time in bringing things back up and reworking what we had last week thought was appropriate. Whether we can do that with this body, I don't know. I don't know how Dick found it with his group, but I would hope that it would work that way, that if somebody comes up with a strong objection.
I think Joe's fears are unfounded. That could prove to be wrong, but I don't think it.
Okay, well,
It's a problem.
can I pursue just a little bit?
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
As I recall Robert's rules, as you adopt an article, you would go through and complete the process of doing the text of the charter, and then you would come back and the entire document would be open to amendment and review to make your internal adjustments and corrections. Is that
Substantially correct.
Mr. Chairman, for Mr.
Sardi.
Josephson, there's a number of things that we could do. You can use a rescinding motion. You can use a renewal motion. As we take action, other than the final charter, nothing has happened other than we have taken action. We've not set any legal machinery in course. I think the really important thing, and where this might well come in, would be the final charter adoption. Then you, by your time frame and so on, may have set something in motion that cannot be easily stopped. And I think that might be the critical area where you would want, say, to have 2 readings or public hearings or so on. I wonder if this might be something that could have consideration as we develop a work program, the way we're going to attack the charter preparation.
I have here, not on the agenda, but I did talk late this afternoon with Fred Chai, and he had something I was going to ask him to present to us a little later, a requirement for a management committee, a program of work or a management flow deal. And I thought perhaps I would appoint a committee to go through that with Fred as chairman and Jane and Arliss and Bill as members.
Mr. Chairman, you do have an item on the floor for consideration.
Pardon me, I forgot. We do have a motion by Arliss, second by by Mary Cronin to adopt the rules of procedure, and is there further discussion on it?
Inquiry has the motion, the Tuesday noon motion has been
Has
done.
that been developed and passed?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that the suggestion of a work program is very good, because the confidence I have is in the group, not in the rules, with
Right,
all respect,
absolutely.
in terms
Oh, sure,
of
sure.
getting a document done, because theoretically, a capricious group could adopt a charter tonight, you know.
That's right.
I know we're not capricious, but I think we should have some kind of approach to this so that the public knows that isn't going to happen, and that there will be an orderly time for them to be heard. Because the opportunity for the public to have input is only meaningful if their input is related to the work schedule.
Right. Well, we do have the motion. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Passed. Now, Shane, you have passed the draft of your suggestion for executive secretary.
Lisa has.
Lisa.
Not Lisa.
Arliss and I drew up a rough draft of what we felt, would be, what we felt the executive secretary should do, and what we felt, qualifications she should have. And I came over and talked with Bill Kirk and Betsy Rhodes about it.
You might identify them, who they are.
They work for, Bill Kirk is the personnel director here, and I think Betsy's the assistant personnel officer. And Betsy drew up this rough draft of a job description for the executive secretary. It gives typical assignments, what the employment standards should be, and then once we have run an ad and have received applications for the executive secretary, what what selection standards we should use and what knowledge they might have in an area, and abilities they will have. When I talked with them, they looked over our rough draft and they said, "You're not asking much of an executive secretary, are you?" And I said, "No, not really." And we know that we're not going to find somebody that knows, that is an expert in all of these areas, but hopefully we'll have, a rough idea of what something is or where they can get information from. And so this is what you have is the rough draft for the executive secretary, and we'll run an ad if you want to do it that way. When we hire our executive secretary, we don't have to run an ad in the newspaper. Any form of hiring, any way we want to handle it is up to us. If we want to run an ad in the newspaper, we can do it that way. If everybody has a person they feel would be great as an executive secretary for the job, when they submit it, and that's who we decide upon, that's fine.
We are not required.
We're not required to run an ad. We don't have to be an equal opportunity employer. Whatever we want to do is up to us. No.
10 years ago. We don't have to be an equal opportunity.
When we're processing our applications, the borough clerk's office said that we can ask for resumes and applications to be sent through them, and they would hold them for us.
It's a wonderful idea.
Mr. Chairman,
Arlen?
wanted to point out that Lisa and I used as a basic format and built on the executive secretary position that we have for the bicentennial. We went through this process just about a year ago, and at that time we worked through the city personnel department. Our salary range was, and if I'm computing Dick's figures, you're talking about $30,000 for that position on an annual basis?
Well, let's get
Well,
into that.
okay, all right, fine. All right, we were talking much the same as this, perhaps not quite the public orientation. We had some 44 applicants. They were basically reviewed by the personnel office. I think we'd advertised for a period of 10 days, and out of that we got down to 6 that we actually interviewed. So if there is some public notice of this, I think you need to perhaps consider that you'll have a rather substantial response for it.
Did you come to any conclusion, recognizing we have a budget document and be submitted later, but was there any cross-discussion regarding
Yes.
wage?
Yeah. When I took this to them, Arliss and I figured that, we should, because this person is going to be doing a lot of work and, will be fairly knowledgeable in a wide variety of things, that anywhere between, $16,000 and $20,000 per year would be their salary. And
No fringe benefits included.
there would be no fringe benefits at all. They are an employee of the Charter Commission. They don't work for the borough. They don't work for the city, but they work for the chairman and for the commission. And so that's the only pay that they get is.
Mr. Chairman,
Honest.
one thing that may be of value for consideration of this and also for the budget, we've just gone through this with the state site selection. You can figure approximately 20% for those fringe benefits that you're not getting. I think the figure is somewhere between 18 and 20% for such things as insurance, workman's comp, and so on. And so it may be that we'd have to go to that higher salary range.
Chairman, how do they work with Holden and FICA?
They don't. They're on like a consultant basis.
On a consultant basis?
Is that how you do it?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Lisa?
after we run the ad and put our closing date on it and all, with the ombudsman the borough hired, they had the application sent through the clerk's office and the assembly. There was a committee from the assembly that reviewed the applications, and they put them, into different stacks as to how they apply. This committee reviewed them, and then they interviewed like 10 people, and then from the top 3 that were left, they went before the assembly and spoke to the assembly, and then the assembly made their decision on how the ombudsman would be, who the ombudsman would be, and this would be, I think this would be a good course to take, that we would have a committee that would
Screening
review
process.
Mr. Chairman?
review the applications, and then the whole commission to decide upon the
Mr. Fisher?
I
secretary.
wonder if Lisa found out how much the ombudsman was being paid, or
He makes
Marion.
almost $1,100 a month.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Josephson?
how long does this process take to publish and screen the when
We
would we
don't.
actually have an executive?
Depends on us. When we run our ad, the borough,
It would be up to us, I assume, to set a date. I don't want to let it run too long.
Betsy said she would help us with an ad in the paper if we wanted to run an ad for this.
You indicated a little bit ago that perhaps something somewhat after that employment standards paragraph would be used in the ad.
Yeah, this would be what we would put in the ad, plus, from what is in the typical assignments, we would make up a general sentence as to what their assignment would be and what their duties would be. And then when we are, thinking of, when we get down to the selection process, Betsy said that it would best would be where we had 6 typical questions that we asked each person, and that when we are interviewing them, that this would be the selection standards that we would, pretty much base this on.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sheffield?
Well, as I listen, are we talking about an executive director or an executive secretary?
Executive Secretary. Am I right?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we had seen it in that terms. I see it's on the agenda as executive director.
I
We
put
had
both.
we had looked at it as an executive secretary with typing skills in order to get the work out, but that the recording secretary would be a separate person. The last time they used a person from the borough clerk's office, I believe that Colleen Klein, for instance, who is the office manager for the legal department, and I believe typed these minutes, is interested perhaps in being that recording secretary, whether that's the way you'd want to go or not. But we
Okay,
do
well,
see that as two people.
Well, then, Mr. Chairman, we haven't really decided tonight at this point if we're going to have a recording secretary or an executive director or an executive secretary and or two or three or whatever.
No, this is what we're,
So we can just talk about how we're going to have the executive secretary's qualifications, and if that's where it falls, then that'd be fine. And I guess we're going to talk about a director probably eventually.
whether we have a, no, I don't think,
On the agenda, that,
I merely put that on.
okay, I'm just
Bill.
trying to find if we're really talking about executive secretary now.
We're talking, Mr. Chairman, aren't we just talking
Right.
about one executive secretary?
Yes.
And that's it?
Right.
Right.
Well, I think
I
that's-
didn't know what title you folks might want to give that position, executive secretary or executive director.
Well, Mr.
But-
Chairman,
Mr. Joseph?
I move that we approve the qualifications for executive secretary as prepared by the subcommittee.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Sturgilewski.
Mr. Chairman, will the ad show the wage range on it?
That's up to us.
Well, shouldn't we have a
I would-
range on it, 16 to 20, or whatever we agree on, and that is shown in the ad?
I don't, I haven't hired enough people myself directly to know whether that's good or bad.
Mr. Chairman,
Lisa?
when it comes to preparing the ad, you know, we decide to submit it through the newspaper and run it in the newspaper. Betsy Rhodes, who works here for personnel, said that she would, you know, help us in preparing the ad. And she used to work in L.A. and preparing the personnel down
A
there.
lot of queers in L.A., you know.
And she said, you know, we would want to keep it as short as we could, and so if you're applying, if there's an executive secretary for something, you would consider, you would assume, hopefully, it would be a pretty good salary. But I would use her discretion as to whether we would put it in or not.
Well, my experience has been if you use a high salary, you tend to discourage a lot of people that are making considerably below that because they feel it's one that requires quite a qualified secretary, like a legal secretary. Secondly, you attract the better people when they see the high salary.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Fisher?
The qualifications are great, and I don't have a problem with that, but why don't we call it executive director? It seems to me that there's some prestige in that term that wouldn't be in the word executive secretary. You know, the old theory that titles tend to get people
What do we
because of
need
the
the
title.
prestige for?
No, I'm talking about the individual. It'd be more prestige to the individual.
16,000 is pretty good prestige.
Well, no, I would think we ought to.
How was the title?
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Mary?
question.
Mary
If you
Fleming?
wish this executive secretary to have typing skills,
Yes.
for sure, then I think the word secretary probably is apropos. I don't feel that director has any specific connotation as to qualifications. I think that the secretary does.
The other thing, it makes it sound more like a working committee.
That's right.
You know, it's a commission that's really out to do some work and get a secretary.
Mr. Chairman,
Sturgilewski?
I make a motion to get something on the floor.
There is a motion on the floor
Well,
to adopt. And
we haven't
by you.
adopted that. I
Yeah.
thought we took that action.
No,
Excuse me.
No. And Question
Questions?
called. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Mr.
on the same matter, I move that we do advertise this publicly with a display ad for a period of 5 days starting as soon as we can get it in, and that a closing date be given in the ad at the end of those 5 days.
Second.
That's merely for Mr. Chairman, for some discussion. The ad would need to indicate, of course, that it would come to the clerk's office and would need to set up a procedure as to how to process those.
The detail of the ad, I don't think we need to worry about if we're going to do it.
I-
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Why don't we have to be an equal employment opportunity employer?
We're selected.
Because
I thought that was federal law.
well, I'm not sure as to why we don't have to be and why we,
To be on the
that
safe side.
the only thing that qualifies you as an equal opportunity employer, all you have to do is put it, all we'd have to do is put it in the bottom of the ad saying, equal opportunity employer.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman, it's
Mr.
my
Chairman.
intent that we do that. By going public, we in effect become an equal employment.
Mr. Chairman, we're not an
Sorry.
employer, are we, as a commission? We're employing a consultant.
So,
So we're not an employer.
almost.
I think
If,
this
We're
if,
hiring
if we,
Right. Yeah,
if we
you're-
are
you're
an
purchasing
employer, then we're
services.
subject to
That's right.
FICA and all the other things, and we would have to make those reports.
But if you're not an employer, you're not obligated.
If we're hiring a consultant, different story.
Mr. President, could
Yeah,
we
Mr.
say,
Tony?
could we say in the ad, then add, within parentheses below the executive secretary, consultant?
Or a consulting position.
Yes.
I think
Can you
that
make
should
a
be
note of
clear
that?
in our ad, but we're not employing on the other basis. Mr. Joseph?
Yet to pick.
All right.
Do we really want to close the period on the same day of publication? It seems to me.
So 5 days.
It seems to me that if I were, I would be infuriated to take the paper home and find that
Find
the
it.
office closed 2 hours earlier. I just like to change that, Arliss, to allow the day following public blast publication.
By common consent, if it's, Mr. Chairman, to
Fine.
change that motion.
Is that
Good idea.
all right with everybody?
Yeah.
Change it. Maker in the second? So ordered. Closing date, next day. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. I think the general discussion that Lisa has given us on the selection process, I think we can work with. And unless there's further discussion as to the manner of selection of the individual.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jane?
are you going to appoint a personnel committee?
I would think that Arliss and Lisa have already dug deeply into this, and I'll continue there. Is there somebody else that
I would like to volunteer
you'd
to
like
be
to
on it.
volunteer be on it? And Jane, then? Anyone else want to be on it? Okay, Dick.
You're going to pick a blonde.
Dick, Jane, yeah.
Well, I figured we needed a male attitude.
I
I do.
agree.
I think this, we're, whatever the recommendation, we're still going to come down to 2 or 3 people that we're going to interview as a group. So, is there any further discussion regarding manner of selection?
Did you say that they will kind of screen and then we will?
They'll screen and bring to us.
Fine.
Mr.
Basic
Chairman,
group. Mary.
Crowley, the assembly went over most of the applications, not just the 3.
Mr. Chairman?
They did point out which were the top 3 in their choice, and those are the ones we discussed mainly, but we did have information for quite a number more than the 3 when we made our choice for ombudsman.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Parker?
When we would review the applications, I would think that we would, divide them up as to who met the, general qualifications, who met the, then the selected, and have them in different groups, and that they would be, available to everybody, and that, we would show them to everybody so that if they thought we'd bypass somebody that possibly would be there.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I wonder if we might, just so we can have this accomplished and not have to get into conference calls. I wonder, would it be appropriate possibly for, since Lisa has worked with the personnel directly on this, to be the one responsible for placing the ad, or would the committee like to know what the context of that ad is?
Oh, heavens, no.
To handle that part of it. Okay. All right, then I'm wondering, as we set our date as early as we can, and there is a lead time on getting these in the paper.
5 days is the lead time. I
Well,
believe, for ads.
that's a problem. And then I'm wondering if in order to expedite this, whether the group would want us to actually set a meeting when we had an interview with certain people, or if you wish us to interview a certain number and bring a recommendation to you, and you just have a copy of the background information before you. I think we need a little more on procedure so we can move this along. It would seem to me that perhaps the committee should break down these into segments and perhaps interview, depending on the number of really good people, say 5 or 6. I think we'll get a substantial number. And then make a recommendation of 3, and perhaps the full commission interview 3. In other words, have a duplicate or a double interview for those top people. That's merely a suggestion, but I think it would help us if we clarified that.
May I ask Bill? He does quite a little bit of employment in the category of the kind of people that we're talking about, I think. How does this sound to you?
Well, I was just going to mention a while ago, if you put the amount of money in the paper, we'll lose most of our help. But, or they called me down applying for jobs. Anyway, in my office, they usually try to screen the people, and I get the last 3 or 4 winners and try to pick from those. But I think Mary mentioned a good point here that if this committee would possibly interview these people and then maybe get it down to the last 5 or 6, but so the commission knows of all the people that were interviewed and maybe just a rough synopsis of those people, but their recommendation and in detail the last 5 or 6 so that we could.
I think
that might be what we're all saying.
I think we have a consensus pretty much
That
of what we'd like to
full
do.
commission would interview the last.
Nick?
No, I just shouldn't get off the committee if, I'm not feeling badly about it at all, but I thought the committee was basically going to come up with a recommendation of 2 or 3 people, but that's fine, either way.
Well, do you have a consensus idea, opinion in your mind now? We'll go on from that then to...
No, you couldn't.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
have,
sure.
have we set on a figure that we're going to use, or?
The recommendation of the committee at this date was 16 to 20,000.
Well, I'd like to talk a little more about that.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, would
proposed
it-
budget lists 10 here as one figure.
Jim, excuse me a moment. Did you have some
Well,
comment
Mr.
about
Chairman, I was
that?
just going to say, I wonder if that's appropriate under the budget to discuss that item.
Okay.
Well, then we'll have to come back to it to make sure it's in the ad appropriately then.
All right, fine. We'll consider it under the budget and go from there. Let's ask Mr. Shy and Mr. Josephson what they found out about and what their recommendation is on a attorney.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
there are several ways of doing this. One way is to ask that the Alaska Bar Association circularize among its Anchorage members, perhaps in conjunction with other mailings, a notice that a position is available, and thereby to invite interested lawyers to indicate their interest. I contacted the Bar Association, and the Bar Association would be willing to perform such a mailing for us if it's your desire to do that.
Fred and I have talked about this and also had some input from Mrs. Holmes before she left. And the two names that were most prominent in our minds were Robert Flint, who served the prior charter group, and Rick Garnett, who was an assistant attorney general. I contacted Mr. Garnett, and I can give you, because I have here, some of his background. He was a graduate of Swarthmore College and the University of Virginia Law School. Upon graduation from law school, he worked for the Virginia Constitutional Revision Commission, which revised the state constitution of Virginia. Incidentally, that was accepted by the voters of Virginia. He was in private practice in Pennsylvania for 2 years, and then for 3 years, and then joined the Department of Law in Juneau, specializing in the legal problems of the Department of Community and Regional Affairs. He stayed there for 2 years, from 71 to 73, and then joined the firm of Ely Guess Rudd. He left Ely Guess Rudd in September of 74 to return to the Department of Law, where he is an assistant attorney general working on education problems. He was the attorney of record for the state in the first reapportionment case in the challenge of ballot wording issue involving the Constitutional Convention. And he has published a monograph on local government for the Institute of Social, Economic, and Government Research on local government in rural Alaska. So I think that he has the background to do the job. He's very interested in doing it, and he is available for interview whenever the commission desires. I also contacted Mr. Flint. Mr. Flint is also available to do this work, and I didn't get biographical material because most of you have familiarity with him because of his prior service. He told me, and this maybe this will refresh Dick's memory, or maybe you'll feel that Bob urged this. He said that his pay rate as attorney for the Charter Commission was $42 an hour, but that the total ran up to $15,000, in excess of $15,000, because he attended all the hearings. Is that he expressed his personal view that should not be, such attendance should not be a requirement this time. Both gentlemen are available for you to talk to, and both seem equally excited about doing it. The only thing I wanted to add on Mr. Garnett is that before he told me that he was willing to serve if asked, he said he would contact the Attorney General to see if the Attorney General had any conflict, and he notified me this evening that Mr. Gross approves his doing this if it is the desire of the Charter Commission to use him. And I understand they'll work out some conflict time or something like that.
Yeah, that's an expensive item, isn't it? That's an expensive item, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, does Joe mean that the state would take care of the cost while
Well,
comp time?
No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that. I mean that. I don't mean that. Although Mr. Garnett said that he was so intrigued by it that he would work without fee if that was the desire of the commission. I told him that we had a budget item and probably wouldn't want to do that time. But what I meant was that by that was that he would, if the commission's work took him out of his office, he would give Mr. Gross some weekend time or something like that.
There'd be no
He would
conflict.
be allowed to accept money for this.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have another comment.
Ronnie?
Mr. Burton, who served the other charter commission, also indicated an interest in which I believe I told Mr. Joseph.
You did.
I'm surprised he didn't include that, since he included the other attorney that attended the other commission.
Mrs. Boyd's correct. She did. I didn't know that he was interested, but it reminded me that he had certainly.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I wonder, Joe, if you could make a comment. One of the most important things on writing this charter, I think, is going to be the manner in which it is written. And committees don't write things too well sometimes. And I think we're going to need an attorney not only with legal skills but an ability to transmit those into very readable document. And is there a way to judge that fairly? I think that's just critical.
Well, I think you could, in the case of Mr. Flint and Mr. Burton, the people who work with him could speak to that. In the case of Mr. Garnett, he has had some published writings, for example, that has to
Mr. Chairman, could we ask Mr. Josephson to get a copy of that monograph that he wrote, say, for us to have a chance to do it?
You would.
Pardon?
I've heard very good things.
Is it the sense of the body that they want a full-time attorney, or is it the sense of the body that, in considering the attorney, he should be on a limited, more limited basis in all hearings and all meetings?
Mr. Chairman, I have a
That's
suggestion
funny.
on that. I believe that most of these attorneys that are suggesting they're interested in acting might be willing to accept a consulting flat fee for the job and let them decide which things they wish to attend and such like.
Does that sound reasonable, Joe?
And we would, if we specifically wanted them, we would specify, but otherwise they're welcome to attend any. So that they don't feel embarrassed if their interest is.
Based on my conversations, I think that both would be comfortable with a flat fee. I'm sure that would be true.
I think all three would.
A flat fee, a flat dollar amount.
$5 amount.
Mr. Chairman, you mean like $5,000 for a charter?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, that was what I was
That would be the easiest way to deal with it. That would be the easiest way to deal with it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm afraid of the results we're going to get, but, I'll bow to Joe's superior knowledge in this case. He's worked on this basis before, but I'm very nervous about that. It seems to me when a guy uses up $5,000 worth of time, he's going to quit. That isn't necessarily true. He's not going to quit, but he's sure going to slow down a lot.
Mary Troney?
I feel that any of those three that have been spoken to would not accept the job if that's the way they felt about it when they were told what they proposed flat fee was going to be. I think that all three of those men obviously have integrity.
Joe?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that I agree with Mrs. Stoney that having talked specifically with two of the three, that Mr. Flint expressed the view that nowadays a $42 an hour rate isn't really adequate, not current. But I really can't imagine Bob Flint or Garnett or Burton tiring out on us because some hypothetical number of hours have been expended. I just don't think that they're all motivated and interested in local government. Mr. Garnett's first exclamation to me was that he would do it as a community service. I was the one who told him it was a budget item, so I really don't think that's going to be a problem in this instance.
I can say this, we didn't even consider paying the attorneys
For the city one?
for the city one. We weren't even smart enough to think they wanted it.
If it's agreeable, I could ask the three people who've been mentioned if they want to come next Thursday. I give them an hour and talk to the commission.
Is that the sense of the commission? Do you want to interview for this almost non-paid job, or would you like to have them present themselves to us, or how would you like to handle it?
Make a motion.
Any suggestions,
The
Fred?
quickest way to do it is to have all three come down and just give us their views, and then after they are completed, we just ballot. It seems to be the easiest, simplest way of doing it. You just sit down and take a vote based upon what we hear. I mean, because all three are uniquely qualified from what I see.
Do you wish to have any others considered or asked?
think we got 3 excellent ones. I don't think we need to solicit more.
I agree to that. Jane?
No, I disagree. I think that's what it is.
Mr. Chairman,
Let's,
I would wonder if Joe might ask them when they come. I would be particularly interested in having them speak to their approach as to terminology and language, how detailed it must be. Can it be very broad language or need it be very specific language? That to me would be important.
Mr. Chairman, what,
Mr. Chai?
along the line what Alice is saying, why don't we write these conditions out and give it to each one of them before they come here so they can think about it and think how they'll address that subject.
Well, I could prepare something that includes it, and I would also, I think, prepare a question like, given a flat fee arrangement, what aspects of the commission's program would you think would require your prime priority of attention in terms of attendance?
That's excellent.
Could we...
I'll motion to that.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other suggestion. Mr. Josephson could come up with a brief subject that he would like them to write on. We would have something to go on how they write, too. A short...
What did you cover in
Well,
governmental aid or
it was-
fees?
It was our thinking that we needed some consulting to us from some governmental group. I don't want to keep going back to the original Charter Commission, but the original Charter Commission did use the Public Administration Service for this purpose. As you might remember, the Public Administration Service was the group that consulted with the framers of the Constitution, the state constitution. And we felt that something along those lines was necessary. I don't know if Mr. Rowan of the Rowan Group has contacted anyone else here, but he has contacted me, and he also has a very interesting idea of a way that this group can get constant input from the public. And along those lines, I would suggest that we talk with Mr. Rowan. And basically, that's where the governmental budget came from. It was kind of pulled out of the air. Bill and I did discuss one more thing. There's a governmental consulting firm in Alaska called Robert Nathan Associates, they're Washington-based, which wasn't here at the time of the original Charter Commission, and that's another possibility.
Mr. Chairman, I
Mary?
have one item to mention. Both Mary Coffey and Don Smith said that they have, each of them have a box of supplementary material that might be of interest to them. Mr. Smith hasn't gotten it into my hands yet, and Mary Coffey has been so busy with the election that she hasn't had time to go to the warehouse and look for her box of other things in addition to the charters that she thinks came from the last commission or the one before that were thought might be useful to any future commission.
As many of you know, Mac McMahon, who was on Charter Commission before, is leaving the country, and he came barging up to my front door of the bank with a truck, and he said, "Ha, you're Eddie, boy." And he brought in about 3 boxes full of material, which I have not dug into, but he says it covers the minutes of the previous meetings of previous Charter Commission, other copies of law of 29 and other things. So we really do need this office space in fairly short order to get a place to put some stuff and where maybe we can go and sit down individually and go through some of these things when we have time to do so, if we desire to do so. A place that we don't have to reorganize every 15 minutes and move from.
May I go ahead and continue. Along with that, let me get back to Mike Rowan for a moment. He presented a proposal to the mayors of the city and the borough, which I have a copy of, which I asked him for a copy of, concerning unification. And I think we really should take the opportunity to talk with him. I think that his input would be quite valuable to us. He's done a number of research projects in the Anchorage area concerning unification, asking the unification question. And I think it would be valuable talking with him.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
doesn't he operate basically asking question as opposed to setting up public formats and public hearings? It's a research group, is it not?
Yeah, right.
Is it a polling group, a poster group?
Partially, yeah. That's one of his functions.
Do we need a polling group?
I think we do. I think we do. From, or let's say, this is Jane. My feeling is that for a charter to pass, we are going to have to do whatever we have to get as much information from the voters as we can about what it is that they want. And we have the public opinion poll, which appeared on the ballot, but I don't know that that is all-inclusive enough to be able to depart from that and drop a charter that will be acceptable to the majority of the people. And I think that perhaps the role of the commission should be not only one of selling the charter once we've written it, but perhaps more importantly, in the formulation of the charter, working with citizens groups as much as possible. And Mike Rowan's suggestion is one method of finding out what those people out in Borderland are thinking. It's one suggestion, but I think it's that type of thing is something that we should very seriously consider.
Jim, I have talked to
Josephson.
Mr. Rowan and seen his paper, and I think it would be worthwhile to meet with him. If for no other reason than whether a contract is made with him or not, I think we'll benefit from his
Just
perceptions
open
as to what happened
discussion.
before and what happened.
Ms. Parker?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Boucher has formed a consulting service, and he is working in conjunction with Mr. Rowan in doing a survey type deal for whatever anybody wants, and they do 4 reports a year and, charge for that. So maybe in connection with talking with Mr. Rowan, we could also talk to Mr. Boucher, since he is,
Mr. Chairman, I think that we have to distinguish a couple of things here. As I understand the Rowan proposal, it's a way by which, as Jane said, the public is involved not just through a sort of stilted hearing process, but actively participating in a way by which, when the election is held, we really know what the result will be because we've been so closely attuned to public reaction. In fact, the community knows what the result will be and goes to the polls to memorialize a consensus that's already really been created in the process. There still, however, may need to be consulting work of a different nature, which is the nuts and bolts and substance of technical problems. Is that not
That's
correct?
good. And we may want, for that, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
for that matter, we may want to combine those. I mean, that's a possibility too. But in any event, Mr. Rowan, incidentally, is based in Washington, D.C. His office is in D.C., although he has in fact, he has an office in Washington, D.C., Anchorage, Alaska, and Puerto Rico, if you can figure that out.
Is that a triangle rate?
I guess so. Well, he has a great deal.
Tax gods.
He's done a lot of interesting things in Puerto Rico that is tempting to use here. At any rate, he is going to be in Anchorage next Monday. And would be available for a certain Thursday and may be available a week from Thursday. I would suggest we talk with him a week from Thursday, seeing as how our next Thursday night's meeting is pretty well used up. Unless we can't. Mr. Chairman, could you check on that, or you want me to? Or?
You know, Mike,
Yes?
that'd be,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
also
Chaffee.
if there's any other consultants that would like to make a presentation along the same line, we're going to talk with them, particularly if they're Alaska-based consultants.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent idea. Let me talk also with Lee Gorsuch of Robert Nathan Associates and see what he'd like to.
Mr. Chairman, at that point, I think we're mixing apples and oranges.
Yeah.
here.
That's true.
One is an economist,
And one's a pollster.
and one is he's more than a pollster, but essentially he's a communicator with the public. And, that doesn't quite necessarily make him a scientific pollster. I'm a bit chary about most people who put out things called scientific polls. I mean, I think that the
You've been
question
burned.
would be,
You've been burned.
having participated in and instructed a number of these.
Okay.
Mr. Sheffield?
Mr. Chairman, Dick and I preparing this budget and then sitting down today for about an hour in the office talking, but this is where we stopped up the top. I think we started at the bottom.
And that was my problem.
Miscellaneous. We thought we were in no trouble there. In public hearing, there's an office of Elijah Grant, probably okay on the executive secretary and the recording secretary. We got stopped up here. We spent the whole hour on about 25,000. Feeling that the 5,000 was probably a good figure if somebody didn't want to, was not going to charge their full fare. Dick talked about the micro and thing, and I have to admit that I'm kind of have a real hang-up with all consulting fees, or all consultants and advertising agencies. But I realize the merit that I think that we should at least listen to what Mike Brown has to say, but in no way confuse it with a consultant that I think that the Charter Commission ought to have, either on some sort of a basis, it would be full-time or part-time, we're involved in certain things of writing and that this committee can approve and disapprove of and put input to it from the input we get from other groups.
Ms. Parker?
Kind of along the same lines as to what Mr. Sheffield was saying. In talking with the personnel people here, they were saying that, aside from our executive secretary, that there might be other staff that we will have to employ at certain times, maybe for a couple of days, have Kelly girls in to do work and stuff like that. And so, just to throw that out also.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
in the
Shaw?
interest of time here, why don't we just freeze on the budget and go into this detail at a later date when the occasion arises to hire these people. In the meantime, we can talk with this Mr. Rowan and anybody else. I mean, I think the question before us now is the budget and
That's true.
not the details of what
Well,
budget.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, if I understand, I know what you're saying, and I didn't propose to mix apples and oranges here, but there are two groups that we should contact probably, and that's Robert Nathan and Public Administration Service. I think I could find out how to contact them if you want me to.
If you would,
Okay.
it would be
That's
appreciated.
what I wanted to mention.
All right, let me do that. I won't have
Somebody
trouble
should
throwing
contact at least those
and
two groups as
Yeah.
consultants.
then I'll coordinate. Okay, may I go on with the budget then?
Right.
The rest of this really, if this is $2,500 a month for an executive director. If we're talking $1,500 a month instead, that's obviously going to be reduced by $4,000. Recording secretary is a full-time person, and if that's part-time, that can be reduced by about $1,000. The rest of it, I don't know what office rent's going to be, but that's a reasonable guess, I think. And the rest of it is based on actual experience from the last charter.
On office supplies, for example, with all this material that we've got Xeroxed here, is this just a contribution in kind from the borough, or is this being itemed out somehow?
At this point.
At this point, there's been no contact to me as chairman that any of this was being charged to us. But
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
They did not quote me a price. I asked them if they could furnish the Charter Commission with these materials to start us off with, and nobody suggested a chargeback to it, but I won't guarantee you.
If it gets lost in the mill, fine.
And if it comes through, why,
Don't be
you may
surprised.
know that it came through.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
I may be the only one in the commission who has to ask this question, but do I understand that we do have in fact $46,000?
50, I believe they stated, weren't they?
50 in the.
Is it understood in the assembly that after June 30 we may be coming back for additional funds?
Mr.
No.
Chairman?
Yes,
I
Mr.
think the
Floyd.
Assembly realizes folks come and come and come.
Mr. Chairman, it was pointed out to me, and I mentioned to Mr. Gluski too, that the state statute is fairly clear that the municipality shall pay the bills of the Charter Commission, period. I think it's rather explicit that, that they are not to haggle and
No, but that doesn't mean they will.
well, that's fine, but
That's
I
not-
think the courts would uphold the position that the law is explicit, that we're to pay our bills.
Chairman, does that run include furniture and files and all that? How do we handle that?
Yeah, basically it does. We
It does?
should buy some minor furniture items, but, I think we ought to rent it for the period of time we're hopefully going to be in business.
Yeah.
More than
Mr.
likely
Chairman,
that.
I think we should check and see if there might be an extra
Some
file
available.
or an extra
Yeah,
desk available.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sturgis.
one thing I would like some discussion again for this little committee that's going to be interviewing. I really think we ought to pretty much zero in on a figure for the executive secretary. As Dick stated, if we wanted to go $1,500 a month, we would bring this down to $7,500. But I think we need to perhaps think in terms of a yearly salary that's at $18,000. Is that realistic? We have considerably more budgeted here, and I think that's very important to us when we're talking to these people, that we have some agreement on what the market would provide.
Mr. Chairman, I know that
Mary, for anything? Tony?
I know that the borough has somewhere between, for executive secretaries, are somewhere between 14 and 18. And I think that somewhere between 17 and 20, if you do not have fringe benefits, is in the right neighborhood. And I would suspect that we'd get a good one for 18.
I tend to agree with you. Within the bank, we've found when we get in that category, people who want to live in town will refrain from going out in the pipeline or somewhere else for that kind of money.
That's
Mr. Chairman, just I'd like to hear some discussion as to whether that, say, $18,000 to $20,000 would provide the person we want, which is going to have considerable skills in the public relations field, the ability to set up public hearings and to assist us with the work that perhaps was not provided by such consultants as Roland and so on.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we
Mary,
I agree.
Fred, any other?
I'd like to hear Dick's comment.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my only comment, I would think, if that's kind of the sense of the commission, is that the 10,000 is too high, and that we reduce that to 8,000.
What would that give us?
Well, actually, no. What? I'm going to back up because we've got this 20% thing too is bothering me. Because if you're going to consult with people instead of hiring them, you really ought to tack that 20% on. I don't know. So
That puts you back to 9.
put it back to 9,000. Okay. I would, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to move on this budget proposal and reduce that to $9,000 and make it $45,000 total. And along with that, assume that you'd, Mr. Chairman, you'd present this to the Assembly. More than anything, to report to them, to tell them we're in business and we love them and we would like to cooperate with them, and we hope we can have their cooperation, that sort of thing. public relations service. That's a motion.
Motion for a second. Motion and a second. Is that the chairman present the budget to the assembly?
And the money.
Mr.
At
Chairman.
least 10 members of the commission love them.
Mr. Levesque would be happy to help whoever wants to present the budget to the assembly to put it in borough ease.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Can I
Ms.
ask
Parker.
a question? After we have an ad formulated for the executive secretary to publish, and we take it to the newspaper, who do we charge the cost of the ad to?
Well, charge it to the Charter Commission.
In care of the borough
Care of
clerk?
Care of the borough clerk.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Will they take a charge?
Yes.
If
Speak to
they-
Mary Coffey and she'll explain how to do it.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a critical thing that perhaps you should sit down with Norm Levesque, the finance director. I just talked to him briefly, and he can see that the mechanics of the money can be dispersed by the borough, but we're going to need some mechanics for charging and getting supplies and so on. And perhaps they can pay the bill, but give us the necessary forms to present to them.
Mr. Chairman, that was the reason I said Mr. Levesque would like somebody to check with him to get it in borough ease, because these are administrative details that he will explain how we can make them.
Ms. Froney, thank you. I will check with them, and I hope you will also,
Yeah,
Lisa. And so that we have an overall picture, just where we can charge it, account number or whatever. Is there anything further on the budget that you want to discuss tonight? Not. As I mentioned earlier, I did talk with Fred for a little bit this afternoon, and asked him to bring with him a suggestion for a management committee, a program of work. The objective of the management committee being to design and present to the commission for review and approval a management flow chart with details as to the steps, actions, and milestones the commission will follow in arriving at a charter. Maybe some extent of time thing and some extent items. And I thought that this was an excellent idea. So I will be appointing Fred Chai as chairman, and Jane Angrick, Arla Sturgolewski, and Bill Sheffield. And I will rely on Fred to get you folks together or contact you. Perhaps be able to present a draft at the next meeting or at the latest, the second meeting. How does this hit you for time and for purpose? I know you're busy.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
busy.
just wondering, I could do certain things such as getting time and so on, but I have a real problem of within the next 10 days of participating. I wonder if you might consider another person. I'm really over my head right now.
Fred, as chairman, who would you like to have?
I'll take any volunteers.
Any volunteer?
I mean, what we want to do really is going to be a little pick and shovel work here. We have to really sit down and look at all the various steps and time milestones to them, dates and whatnot, at least target dates. Would you?
Mary Froney?
All right,
Okay,
fine.
that'd be great.
What are the names now again? Chai, Angvick, Sheffield, Crowley.
And if possible, what I'd like to do, I hate springing stuff on people at a meeting cold, is try to accomplish it and get it in everyone's hands before we have a meeting so they have a chance to review it
We'd be
when it comes to the
excellent.
meeting rather than hand it to them at the meeting.
Mr. Chai, when would you like to get together? I'm free Friday evening. Or-
Do you think Marge will go for that?
Or during the daytime.
Well, how about, Jane, what's your schedule?
I'm open.
Uh,
I mean, My preference is not to meet on Friday evening.
Well, let me ask this, how about tomorrow afternoon?
That's fine.
Tomorrow afternoon.
No, I can't, Fred. If we get through it by 9 o'clock in the morning, we'll push a plane to Valdez and we'll be back until noon on Saturday.
Okay, well, maybe we can get started and,
I won't be meeting yet on Saturday, will we?
no, but
No.
we could get the preliminaries meeting going, and when we get back, we can have another meeting, and,
You know, I just couldn't be gone.
okay. Well, what's convenient for the meeting spot? Are you both gonna be in the city?
I can come wherever you say.
I just strongly suspect that I'll be in bed, but other than that.
Are you sick tonight?
Yes, she
I've
is.
had the flu all week.
She's shaking a little bit.
So we can meet at my house.
I would drive.
I'll get the flu.
No, they told me I wasn't contagious anymore. Don't believe it. How about,
We can use this room, I'm sure, if you
Well, I'll
like.
tell you what, if you're gonna be in town, is the post office convenient to everybody?
Federal,
The downtown one on
Main
Fourth
Street.
Avenue? Yeah, on Main Street on Fourth Avenue?
Fine.
I got a conference room in there.
okay.
All right, come on over to my office, what time do you meet?
I don't care.
2 o'clock?
Name it and I'll try to be there.
2 o'clock.
All right, 2 o'clock over at my office, it's Federal Energy Administration in the basement of the post office building, we have a conference room there.
What's your number?
We can do that.
Front, side, back.
What do you mean?
You say you're in the
Room number?
basement.
Oh,
Front, side.
G11, it's on the front side, the direct front side on Fourth Avenue.
Okay.
Are there any other things that you'd like to bring for me, Carlos?
Mr. Chairman, I would volunteer to bring, and if there's anything else you'd like to add, to have for the next meeting copies of the election return, the unification law, Title 29, and the City of Anchorage Charter. Can you think of any other basic things that you would want? I mean,
Yeah.
don't say too much. Make it easy.
Say those again.
Are you
Okay.
open to get those?
I'll pick those up.
Fine.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Copies of the election return, the unification law, that's Title 29, a portion of 29. 29 itself, Mr. Thurlow was to have, I'll check with him as to that, and the City of Anchorage Charter.
Carlos, I believe that you should look through the back of this one I gave you. I think it has most of the 29
Well,
that's
that's-
applicable, but if it doesn't have enough, he is willing to
All right,
copy
fine.
more.
I'll check that then.
That's the reason you do not have it on your table
Okay.
tonight.
Mr. Fisher, did you have something? to
No,
add to that?
no, not at all. That was part of the stuff that I thought we were going to have tonight. That's all right. Fine. Yeah, we do need those things.
Carlos?
Mr. Chairman, just one other thing. On the matter of public
I have one, by the way. Don't forget 11.
Okay. On the matter of public relations, I wonder if we should consider printing our agenda on a regular basis, such as the council and all the various boards and so on, or perhaps that's not appropriate at this time, but
Well, I think that when we get set, I would like to see us do it.
Regular basis.
Yeah.
Read it like you do things like the bird page.
That's a good
I was
idea.
just going to say, don't do it until we know where we're meeting.
Joseph?
Mr. Chairman, are there persons here wishing to bring anything before the...
All right, I think you're well taken point. We have some guests with us tonight, Mr. Whitson and Mrs. Whitson, I assume, and Mr. Ward and Margaret Smith of the Times. Appreciate your coming. And do you have anything you wish to present to the commission?
I have nothing tonight. I fully expected I would have a meeting.
I believe it.
Was here, and if possible, I think it would be good to have a few extra copies of the material that you will cover for guests.
You mean of the background material? That,
Agenda. He's got it through the-
Agenda.
Do you represent the group?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be good public relations for us to have perhaps 4 or 5 file copies of the total materials that we have that we can let people look at, not necessarily to give out, but a running file of materials that we are using,
Available.
so that people can have access to those and use them as they see fit. And to the extent necessary, I think we should, as a courtesy and to get good input from people who take the time and concern to come to our meetings, to be as informed as possible.
Source materials are vital to us, and they certainly are vital to anybody that wants to give us any input. Now, that's one of the things about having an office, I think, is substantially necessary to have a place that you can direct people to, and for these things may not be available for giveaway necessarily,
Right.
but for research.
A reading file, perhaps.
Reading file. Is there anything else that come before the meeting tonight?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sheffield?
I thought that possibly, since I might not be in town around, I might not be able to make the meeting, although I'd like to be at that subcommittee meeting, I might want to appoint someone that...
I think not. I think basically I would like to see you on it, and you will be coming back, I'm sure. You run away many times during the course of this next 6 months, and as will most everybody here.
When you go to Valdezia, you always fly one way and drive the other.
You don't know how long you're running.
When I used to do mental health clinic, I was down succeeding Tuesdays for a month and never landed. You know, you go around, come back, around, come back.
Is there anything else? Unless you're, yeah,
I was just going to move that we adjourn.
thank you. A motion is accepted, no need for a second.